Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to the video. This is Kugane and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 Flesh and Blood cards that I have seen in the past skirmish season. Most of you know me as quite a Flesh and Blood experience grinder. I'm currently trying to grind my way into the top 10 of the world in the lifetime experience gained. And needless to say, when the skirmish season was re-announced, I went ahead and signed up to 21 skirmish events. During these games I went up against a large range of opponents, both casual and highly experienced, and I saw a lot of cards being played. Among these cards there were 5 in particular that caught my interest. These are not necessarily the strongest cards in the game, but these are cards you definitely want to look out for. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. The first card I want to cover here is Push Forward. Push Forward kind of caught me by surprise. I've seen a range of Dorinthia players and Kasai players run it, usually the blue version, but I did see a couple of Kasai also running the red version. And the reason why this card caught me off guard is because of the second line of text. The first line of text says your next weapon attack this turn gains +1 or +3 depending on if you're running a blue or a red version of this card. But the second line says if you've attacked with a weapon this turn, your next attack this turn gains Dominate. For some reason, and maybe because I've been reading this card too hastily, I completely slept on the fact that this Dominate given to the next attack can even be given to something like a Command and Conquer. So what I saw some Dorinthia players do, which was rather interesting, they would swing with a weapon, somehow give it a go again, then put a push forward on the field, and then follow that up with a Command and Conquer, giving the Command and Conquer Dominate and thus making it extremely difficult to block and getting rid of my arsenal. I got caught off guard by that, and I think this gives Push Forward quite a bit of flexibility in terms of what kind of a warrior build you want to run. Like on the one hand you can continue running the generic Dorinthia with reactions version, but there are a couple of Dorinthia decks out there that are running attack actions nowadays, and I think a card like this could really push a deck like that over the edge, because just imagine you could do a 7 damage and Lightning Strike with Dominate, and that might just be enough to win you a game. The next card I want to cover is Exude Confidence. Exude Confidence is actually one of those cards that I ended up putting into my own Ira deck because I was curious how it would interact with the metagame. And it actually interacted rather well, because what this card can do is it can completely stop the opponent from using defense reactions for the entirety of the combat chain. If you combine this with something like a Razor Reflex or a Snapdragon Scales to give it a go again, you can pretty much go ahead with all your big attacks and just pray that your opponent does not have any defense reactions, and thus getting all that juicy damage in all at once. I think Exude Confidence is one of those overlooked cards in Monarch right now. Like, a lot of decks are not really running it, but I feel if you're running more than 16 blues in your deck, or maybe at least 15 blues in your blitz deck, you should definitely consider running a copy of this. Especially in ninja decks is really good because you can pitch to the bottom early on, and in the late game when you're just drawing blues, you will draw into your Exude Confidence and have a bunch of cards ready to buff that card up to like 6, 8 or even 10 damage, depending how far behind you are on the tempo plan. If you are the one that is holding the tempo, your opponent is in for a lot of damage that they likely cannot do anything about. Card number 3. What is scarier than a Kano that is throwing a forked lightning at you? Well, a Kano with 5 intellect. The next card on the list is Nourishing Emptiness. Nourishing Emptiness is a card that I see being used by Dorinthia and Kano players because of the fact that they don't really run attack actions in the main deck, at least usually they don't. Because of this, the Nourishing Emptiness, even if they draw it in the late game, it still has that juicy Dominate and +1 intellect effect tied to it. And I saw a bunch of Kano players really abusing this effect by playing in Nourishing Emptiness in the middle of the game, by arsenaling it, then drawing into 5 cards and then having all the resources available to go in with a very big Fork Lightning turn. At the same time, I also saw the Runtier players using it in a similar fashion, like they try to gain the tempo by throwing big hits your way. Usually you are blocking and then suddenly they nourishing emptiness you out of nowhere. I even saw some of the Runtier players kind of tricking me in the sense that they attack with the weapon, I kind of overblock, they go ahead and give the attack go again, and then they suddenly hit me with a nourishing emptiness at a point that I was unable to block. Like one time I even blocked for 12 because I wanted to get rid of a counter on the Dawnblade, and then I got hit by a nourishing emptiness that I couldn't even block other than using my mask and my tunic. So I think nourishing emptiness is one of those staples that should probably find its way into more decks, especially with Prism being so popular in the constructed format right now. So if you haven't bought any copies of this particular card yet, I really advise getting a couple of copies of it soon, because I think this is one of those cards similar to Command & Conquer and E-Strike that will likely go up in value in the long run. The next card I want to talk about is a card that kind of caught me off guard, and that is Merciful Retribution. Like whenever I think about Prism, I always imagine them using like the big phantasm attacks and attacking him for a lot of damage, but I faced a couple of Prism players that have a completely different game plan. What they do, they try to get an aura on the battlefield called Merciful Retribution, and what this aura does is like whenever an aura or attack action card you control is destroyed, you deal 1 arcane damage to target hero. If it's a non-token light card, put it into your hero soul. Like it does have Spectra, but because of this, like if you have a Prism on the opposite side of the table that is putting down an aura like this and then keeps out pumping out those prismatic shields, which will pop if they don't defend them properly, you are going to be taking a lot of arcane damage. And if you're a dummy like me that kind of thought to himself like, okay, it's a Prism matchup, I probably don't need to Null Rune because they're probably not gonna deal a lot of arcane damage anyways, well, you're in a lot of trouble because they are going to be dealing a ton of arcane damage. I still feel Prism is a little bit weak in the current metagame, at least in Blitz, and I didn't have much difficulty to counter the matchup playing Ira myself, but the Merciful Retribution was one of those cards that I think like if more Prism players ran it, they would likely have a much more favorable matchup in the Blitz metagame in general, and it's definitely something to check out and perhaps consider to put in your own Prism deck. Keep in mind, like you could have a bit of a mix or a mid-range version if you please, where you mix up a card like this alongside other prismatic shield generating stuff, so it's not all bad. You can have the good part of both worlds. Do keep in mind that there are a lot of Bravo and Reiner players in the format right now, and you might get caught off guard with all your phantasms being broken, but if you have something like this and a bunch of shield tokens on the field, you can constantly keep putting pressure onto your opponent by attacking him for 1. Of course, against Reiner it's going to be rather difficult because they kind of intimidate your whole hand away, but against a Bravo player you can likely defend with a bunch of cards from hand, maybe use something like a Soul Shield and then work your way through that by pinging them for 1 damage with your shield tokens, and if they do happen to get cracked, you will still have that nice arcane damage. The final card in my list that I feel is kind of gaining a lot of popularity, and I saw that especially during the Skirmish event, is Art of War. Like, of course we know that Art of War is now a staple in the chain deck, which is making a huge splash in the Blitz metagame as of right now, but this has resulted in a couple of other decks kind of adopting it into their main board in both Constructed and Blitz. Like, just the other week I saw a player running it in a Katsu deck, and I have seen some Ira players even playing it right now, so I think Art of War is one of those cards that is being rediscovered by all the meta analysts, if you want to call it that, and people are now including it into their main deck. Of course, we are now starting to move towards a more aggro meta instead of the control meta that we had before, or the mid-rangey meta I would rather say. Like, we never really had a full control meta, but we used to have a very mid-range heavy meta, and now we got the shift towards aggro, so Art of War is suddenly a lot more viable than it used to be, because in the past we always had the danger of decking out, and that's not really a thing anymore. People seem to be rushing the opponent over the finish line. You especially see that with cards like Barraging Beatdown in the Brew deck, which is kind of taking over some meta games in general as well, and I think Art of War definitely has a slot in there too. So if you haven't picked this card up yet, they have been going up in value quite a bit, but I think if you buy it quickly, you might still be able to get a decent deal on it. Just ask around locally, maybe some people have some copies left, or maybe you could even consider picking up an Arcane Rising box just to pull a copy for yourself. It is a Majestic though, but I think Arcane Rising in general is a good box to crack even in a limited, because there's so many good cards in it. There's Art of War, Command & Conquer, you can pull something like a Skullcap or any of the other amazing legendaries out there, and even Grasp of the Arknight is now starting to go up in value, because Chain is one of the top tier decks in Constructed now, and it seems to be one of the better decks in Blitz as well. So yeah, I mean, these are the cards that I personally liked a lot, and when I saw them they really caught me off guard, or I felt like, wow, these are really powerful cards. Of course, some of them are cards that I already included myself, but things like the Exude Confidence that I mentioned earlier, they were a lot better than I thought they would be, and I think I'm going to leave them in my Ninja deck and perhaps a couple of other decks going forward. So yeah, if you enjoyed this content, I also create content over on my own YouTube channel at youtube.com/KuganeGaming. I will put a link down in the description if you want to check that out. I'm trying to get to 1000 subs myself, so if you would be as kind to subscribe to this channel and then hop over to my channel to subscribe there as well, it will be a huge help. I try to keep my videos a bit more on the funny/meme side nowadays on my own channel. It's just a style that I'm kind of exploring right now and I want to push forward, but it's something you might enjoy, especially if you have some newer players in your play group, maybe some Magic the Gathering players that want to change to a different game. I upload budget deck decks about once a week, and there might be a deck out there that interests you or that you want to try out. You could just buy one of my budget decks like through the website like FaB Foundry or other websites, and then you can get started right away. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching. I hope this video was useful to you, and if it was, please let me know down in the comments. I do check back here every once in a while to see if anybody's interacting with these videos, so please go spam that comment section. It will make FaB Foundry happy and it will make myself happy as well. Anyways, take care and see you soon.